All right, let's begin with the splash on the Sunday Standard. How vicious fights exploded into scam. Of course, this is talking about the latest thefts of around 10 billion shilling. That is the amount that has been splashed about following what has been termed as initial investigations. That story is on page 5. Now conceived as a noble initiative to empower youth and prepare them to earn a living while giving back to society, the NYS budget rocketed, and with it came ferocious fights and never-ending billion shillings scandals. That story has been developing every single day this month. Let me begin with you. People have been asking, why always NYS? I know a lot has been said about this, not so much in terms of from the executive side, but why always NYS? What seems to be the problem?
Well, it seems the case that NYS was designed right from the word go to be a special purpose vehicle for public servants to steal. Because you cannot explain when your budget is about 2 billion and then you are given 25 billion and you are under pressure to spend. And when people carry money in sacks, they do this through a number of banks. They are celebrated, they become high people in society. They find their way to the National Assembly, Senate, others are even governors. And it's very clear that if you are responsible for NYS and you pinch a bit of that money, you become a celebrity. You are highly regarded in society. There's no consequence for stealing. Therefore, it seems like there's a very good competition at NYS. If you want to steal money, you create a system, resources are taken to NYS, and you go pick it. And then one begins to wonder, how come, as the National Assembly, the last time they did investigations, nobody has ever been brought to book? And it's very clear that resources have been stolen. There's no consequence for stealing a coin from NYS. And even the investigations that are taking place right now, it seems the case that the investigating agencies may need boosting.
All right.
And one would expect that President Kenyatta is going to direct for the folks who are doing the investigations to get expert advice or expert help. And I think at this time you need organizations like Deloitte or PricewaterhouseCoopers to get in forensic auditors, get in forensic accountants, and make sure that people are punished for the very first time. Because now every single day for the last 2 weeks, there's been a story about NYS in the newspapers. And the tragedy is that these public servants are stealing Kenya's future. Because these are young men and boys from a village in Mosoche in Kisii,
right,
who have hope in NYS. But they wake up one day in the morning and they're reading a story in the newspapers, and all the PS can say is that I'm not sure whether it was 10 billion or it was 900 million lost.
Right.
Now we are starting to argue about the quantum of resources lost. Not that man has been lost, that one has become a side issue. And maybe to quote Martin Luther King, one hopes that one day you'll wake up in the morning and you don't have a corruption story in our newspapers or on TV. Because when you look at the resources we are told that have been stolen at NYS, it's merely 2% of what the Auditor General keeps on reporting every year.
All right.
And one wonders whether or not this kind of thing really troubles President Kenyatta. When he wakes up in the morning and he finds public servants that he has employed directly are looting and therefore running his reputation through the mud, how does he chair cabinet meetings knowing that a number of the people in those cabinet meetings, in fact, are thieves?
All right, let's take it from there. Mark, what Dismas is saying. We know so far the PS, Principal Secretary Lillian Mogo Omolo, and the Director General of NYS, Richard Ndubai, have stepped aside for 3 months to allow investigations. Is this enough?
It's a start, and it's important that we look at all the colors of the rainbow and not just the dull ones, as Dismas is prone to doing. This story is not so negative. Number one, we got this story because it was broken from a perspective of an investigation. That's one. Number two, you must understand that if the permanent secretary has stepped down, this is from the president himself. No one else can lean so heavily on a permanent secretary so that they're able to step down. And I'd also like to remind the nation that the reality of the matter is this, that if the corruption fight is on, guess what? Our headlines will be full of corruption stories with one key difference, that they're being dealt with. And in this particular case, they're being dealt with. In fact, today in the morning, woke up to the news that 40 40 individuals involved with this particular corruption scandal are being sought by the police, and they've gone ahead to apply for anticipatory bail, which tells you that things are changing in this country. It is still in this week where 2 individuals, one a former permanent secretary, have been jailed for their role in the Machakos County land grab concerning a cemetery.
Right.
And that is what is happening in our country. We must learn to celebrate the full spectrum, because if there's a war against corruption, guess what? We will see these stories, but what is critical, we must also see that for once, these people are being dealt with, these people are stepping down, and the police are investigating.
All right, Hesbon, Mark says that Dismas is being a bit too pessimistic. Do you think there's anything to smile about this NYS?
Well, I don't think there's anything to smile about, for the simple reason that the more we get to hear of NYS, the more we critically want to ask ourselves, are we getting value for our money? You're pumping in billions of shillings, and yet what you're getting is very little value in terms of service delivery by the National Youth Service. Yet a few individuals, you know, are allowing millions of shillings to get into individuals' pockets. And I want to agree with Dismas that it's not so much about people stepping aside or you know, the president acting, because we've seen this before. In NYS 1, you realize that the people who were actually accused, you know, and the investigations were carried out, it turned out that they were not even the right people who were supposed to be accused. You look at Engineer Mangiti, he was innocent throughout. And I think the media did a good job to tell us that this is the person who was accused, gave us a chronology of what he did to avert NYS 1, and he failed. He's the one who was taken to court, and he was found not guilty and set free. So how sure are we that these 2 individuals who have stepped aside are just individuals who are innocent, yet the people who we are supposed to focus on are nowhere to be seen? And I think it's about time we focused on other issues. You know, whether we are fighting corruption or not, I think it has reached a point where we are glorifying corruption. What we see in corruption scandals end up giving us an impression that if you are corrupt, it is now increasingly becoming cool, because you will have the attention of the media, you will not be taken to jail, and you will become a lot more popular. So if the president or the powers that be are serious about corruption, they should fight corruption out of the public glare.
All right.
Then you just deal with the consequences. We see people who have gone to jail. You know, celebrating people who are taken to jail for crimes that were committed almost 10 years ago. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Kipchumba, where does the president go from here? Those 2 individuals have stepped aside, but we did see after the NYS 1, if we were calling it that, there was a restructuring of the top leadership and concerning youth affairs and NYS. But analysts seem to think that the fact that we did not focus on the middle-level civil servants is why these things continue. So again, we are seeing people at the top taking a responsibility, quote unquote, but nothing much is happening in, you know, the real nucleus of this whole problem. Where does the president go from here, or the investigating agencies?
Thank you for that, Ben. First of all, the fight against corruption must not be amphoteric in nature. We must have an all slot on corruption without saying we are going for the top or the mid-level. What we must fight is corruption, whether 10 shillings, 100 shillings, a billion or a trillion. The issue of saying that it is 112 million, 910 billion should not be the case. And we must also applaud the president for going for the top dogs in the ministry, the PS and the NYS, Mr. Ndubai. But now we must move from them to the clerk who signed and the person who authorized the payment voucher. Corruption must not be fought from the big fish, because it is the small fish that eventually become the big fish. And to just oppose what Dismas is trying to prescribe, we must also know that we as a country, we have where we have come from. We are not from an alternate universe. We must appreciate that we are coming from an era whereby corruption has been rampant. And when you see 2 PS, a legal officer of City Hall going to jail, it means something is working. Although the wheels are not as fast as they could be, but we need more. More should be done to arrive at that. And secondly, what about, no, we are not hearing the EACC in all these issues. They are mum, so we don't know what they are thinking about. All we are hearing now is DCI, DPP, nothing is happening. I would like a scenario whereby tomorrow I wake up, around the 40 who are being sought are being arraigned in court. That one in itself, it even encourages taxpayers to pay more tax to help us facilitate all this. Because it is very discouraging to hear that we are increasing taxes in other brackets and there are people who have the audacity to take 10 billion. I think it doesn't serve this country any better.
All right. Interesting. Of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on that story. You can catch it in detail on page 5 of the Sunday Standard. On page 6 of the Standard this Sunday, new Uhuru appointees idle as taxpayers bear burden of pay. That is talking about the CSs that were appointed 5 months ago when President Kenyatta was appointing, was rejigging his cabinet, appointing the CSs and PSs. That was in January. He also created a new office of the CAS in every ministry, which called for a revision of the roles of senior officers in the top positions. But the president is yet to issue an executive order that will clearly assign duties to those guys. So we understand that they just idle around and they're being paid. Was it a mistake to create that position?
Well, one wouldn't say that it was a mistake to create that position because the president has a global picture of Kenya's public sector and he's got an agenda to deliver. The question is, after he appoints these people, do the guys working under him come up with clear job descriptions? And then outside also these senior officers who've been appointed, maybe the bigger question we need to ask ourselves is whether or not the Kenya's public sector actually understand their role. That their role is supposed to catalyze socioeconomic activities and not to use their offices as factors of production. If you go through this story into detail and also look at Kenya's public sector from independence, majority of our public servants, wherever they are appointed into office, they do not even understand the job description. They don't even understand their role. For them, they look at that as an opportunity to engage in, selfish projects. That's the reason why if you're appointed today as a top officer at the Ministry of Youth or at NYS, your first priority is to see loopholes so that you can steal a bit of money. Now, these are the public servants. One would expect that when you're given that office, you make sure that you deliver. And maybe at some stage, the president needs to proactively consider to give public servants contracts for 5 years, renewable, so that when you're employed, you don't say that till death or maybe till you get to the age of 90, that's the time you go home. I think public servants need to be given 5-year contracts, and if you do not deliver within the 5 years, you are sent packing. A number of countries have adopted this kind of practices, and it's a tragedy we keep on repeating them day in, day out. Singapore has adopted this system, South Korea has adopted system, and the public servants deliver. If you go to Singapore today, the public servants are some of the highest paid, but they deliver good value. And that may not be said of the Kenyan situation.
All right. Mark, 750,000 shillings is amount CSs earn per month, exclusive of benefits and privileges. 5 months down the line, they still don't know what they do. Is this fair to Kenyans?
Well, you can argue that it is unfair, but it can also be argued that one of the critical things that we need to realize that President Kenyatta did is he shifted a lot of ministries around. Forestry and wildlife was, for example, separated. And to this day, we don't know quite how the Forest Service and the service that's in charge of wildlife, the KWS, are going to work together. And this happens quite a bit for 2 reasons. Number one, let's remember that our constitution is now 8 years old. The implementation of it as imagined by the executive is quite a tricky affair. Number two, let's also understand that the president has not finished implementing his Big Four agenda in terms of the protocols required throughout government. And therefore, there's going to be a delay. That one we cannot deny based on these factors. But it is my hope, and it is my sincere hope, that as the budget is read, we should also have clarity on these positions before we go much further down this road, because the costs are quite high to the average Mananchi.
All right. Husband, these positions have been given or were given to a number of politicians or ex-politicians who lost their seats in the 2017 general election, but who supported Uhuru Kenyatta. What is your take on that particular position?
I think these are political positions. I would understand what the CSs and the PSs earn because they have a defined role, and some of the CSs actually left very lucrative jobs in the private sector. But for the CAS, I think it's political, and with or without a JD, the onus is on all of them who've been appointed to prove their mettle in their respective ministries. They need to ensure that there's a bridge between the technocrats and the Jubilee Manifesto. So I don't think it's a question of giving them a straight-jacketed JD. It's just a question of some of these CSs becoming enterprising in the way they look at the civil service and how the civil service is delivering on the Jubilee Manifesto. I mean, some of them have taken these jobs with a lot of you know, let me say, a lot of easiness into it. And they think that being a CS is to appear in front of the parliamentary select committees. And I think these are the people who are making them look like they don't have jobs. But CSs like Chris Obura, I think they've hit the ground running, and you can actually see that they don't just depend on showing up with their respective CS. They're actually working, they're coming up with programs that would bridge that gap between what the executive has been doing and what the legislature is, specifically the Jubilee Manifesto, is all about. And I want to believe that even the conception of the all CS's position was not just to put them as flaggers, was to ensure that whatever the executive arm of the government was meant to deliver was in line with the Jubilee Manifesto. And if they do that, I think it will put the Jubilee government in a very good position going forward.
All right, Kipchumba, what do you think?
This is where I at times blame the media. We cannot have a blanket condemnation that they are idle. For example, there is Chris Obura. We have seen him outside there.
Well, we have seen a lot of, you can be busy, but there's nothing much you're doing.
But
we have seen people speaking in the media and all that. But there is, the president was supposed to issue an executive order to explain what happens, because without that, there will be duplication of roles in those parastatals.
In terms of what happens and overlapping of roles, that I agree with you. But these are people who sit in their offices. They are not employed to go and dig, so that we say we have not seen them in the shamba digging, they are not doing anything. We have seen Ababu Namamba traversing the whole globe, doing something about marketing our international or expanding our foreign policy. Right. We have seen Kachapin, the former governor. We have seen Shebesh doing something about the youth. So when we talk about people who are doing nothing, what the media should do, tell us so and so. We haven't seen you since we gave you the position of the CAS. But when you say that the old CAS are lying idle, or tell us we need to know their JD, that way we'll have a constructive debate. But turning around and telling us they're idle, we might not go further, because this is a subjective debate rather than objective.
But I think there's an issue. Let me just disagree with Kipchumba for once. Let's understand a few things. Number one, that actually is asking for a JD, and we can't deny that they do need a JD. Secondly, the fact that, there are two kinds of employees. There are those employees who, when you give a job, watajituma, they will go and do the extra things, and we've seen them do that, and we need to commend them. We commend them for that, but that does not deny the fact that we do need to have some sort of job description so that we understand what their role is. And it's not just about them being idle, it's about moving forward, because in 2022 we'll have a new president, he'll have to appoint people to this position. We need to know what these positions do. That's a fair request.
It's true, and we're not in the business of commending.
Yes.
That's this Christmas.
Yeah, but when all public servants in Kenya work at the pleasure of President Kenyatta, I mean, that's a given. Now, it seems the case that these chief administrative secretaries work at the pleasure of cabinet secretaries. Now, if you've got a cabinet secretary who doesn't like your face, who doesn't like your cologne or makeup, they'll not give you a responsibility. So we don't want to have these high-ranking public servants going to office in the morning and merely enjoying a cup of tea and going through the newspapers. They need to be given clear performance indicators so that we can establish. And it's important for Kipchumba here to be very honest to the truth so that we build the nation. And, even the deputy president at some stage, he said he likes people who criticize the Jubilee administration, because the people who criticize you are, in fact, the ones who are supporting you. So both Mark Bichache and Kipchumba must not run away from criticizing the Jubilee administration, because in doing so, we are making progress as a nation.
All right. All right, let's move away from that very quickly. One final story here in the newspapers, in the Sunday Standard still. Page 8, Financial bills out of your mandate. There is a Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, telling off the Senate for originating bills that have financial implications. There are two examples that have been given. One of them we did discuss here. That is the Retirement Benefits Deputy President and Designated State Officers Amendment Bill 2018 that has been tabled by the Narok Senator Ledama Olekina. It's before the Senate right now. There's a Kenya Industrial Estate Bill by former Nyandarua Senator Muriuki Karue, which was shot down. Very quickly, let me start with you, Kipchumba. Is this is it likely to bring another supremacy war between the two levels of parliament?
I will say yes. Anytime we have houses of parliament working the same way we have National Assembly and the Senate, most of the time, due to the interest being pursued therein, we will always have different opinions and divergent views. But what must remain true is the spirit and the will of the Constitution. The Constitution addresses itself to the extent that any money bill must originate from the National Assembly. We cannot reinvent the wheel. That is what must be done. It must originate from the National Assembly and then go to head to the Senate, and not the other way around. Because anything else will be doing reverse engineering, and at the end of the day, we might miss some other things. We might miss the bigger picture. And I think also, Senate has a lot that it has not concentrated on to start going into, wading into other unfiltered waters.
Because of time, let me get the other guy's perspective on this. Hesbon, money bills, like he says, have to come from the National Assembly. What happens to those bills that the Senate feels touch on counties?
I think that is where the conflict is, that Senate is squarely supposed to deal with stuff that touches on the county governments. And there's a gray area. If it is money touching on the county government, then it pushes the bill to the responsibility of the Senate naturally, and I think that is within the law. And then the same law talks about money bills being a domain of Parliament, which creates some sort of conflict. And I think it's incumbent upon the Senate and Senate Speaker and Parliament Speaker to work out how they're going to work, these conflicts that are inherent, rather than play it in the public domain. It doesn't help.
That story by Roslyn Obala is on page 8. You can check it out in more detail to understand it better. Be sure to grab your copy of this